Hello, everyone, and welcome back to She Makes It Work. We're so excited about today's topic, which is AI coming for your job?
Dun, dun,
Dun, dun,
dun.
dun. Abby and I have been thinking about this quite a bit individually and collectively. This question about is AI coming for your job? It is a very hot topic in the business world today. And from my experience, I have been working with a consulting company for a very long time, as we all know. And I've also been working with a number of clients. And I've also had the opportunity to be having conversations with other leaders in the consulting space, specifically over the last few months, and about what their concerns and vision are for dealing with the emerging AI threat in the business world. So I have my own thoughts. I've collected thoughts from some of those folks as well. And just really have been watching the trends and everything that's been going on and really just keeping an eye on the dialogue and the conversation about AI and the advancement. So when Abby and I were talking about this topic, we decided to get a third opinion as well. And so we asked ChatGPT for its opinion about the impact of the emergence of AI and the rapid evolving of AI in terms of how it will impact the business world and specifically jobs.
All right, so asking ChatGPT is pretty meta. Asking AI about AI, we get it, we see that, but I think it's really interesting because ChatGPT brings a lot to the table. So I'm excited to see what ChatGPT thinks, and then we can riff on it.
Yes, definitely some riffing. And when Abby and I first kind of glanced at some of the responses, we noticed that AI came up with some of the things that we'd been thinking and talking about, and also some perspectives that we hadn't actually considered quite yet.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So let's
Let's get
fire
into it.
away.
All right.
Yeah.
So the first response from ChatGPT about this was automation of routine tasks.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the one that's obvious to everyone.
I mean, yeah, I think everything, routine tasks, everything that can be automated should be automated, in my opinion, because I hate doing the same thing over and over and over,
Yes, nobody
personally.
likes that.
Yeah.
And so the first bullet underneath automation of routine tasks is increased efficiency,
Yeah.
right? And you want to make work more efficient. So it says AI will automate many routine and repetitive tasks, increasing efficiency and reducing the need for manual intervention. In areas, this is the part that I want to highlight.
There's a kicker.
Yes, in the areas of data entry, scheduling, and basic customer service.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are things that are very manual that can be automated. Again, everything that can be automated should be automated. But there's always going to be things that can't be automated, but
Yep.
these can be.
Yep. The data analysis part, as well as data entry, can be a little bit of a scary thought, especially because in the last 5 to 10 years, a lot of people have actually been entering the data industry again. There's been an increased focus on getting certifications, degrees on data analysis, and not just data entry. So, where AI might be saying, hey, I'm going to say it again, what it puts on here, it's saying data entry, but I'm going to tell you it also includes data analysis.
Mm.
So yeah, while ChatGPT is talking specifically about data entry, I do have to add that data analysis is another thing that's they're coming for our jobs because it can analyze data sets because there are rules and logic that apply to it. So when you think about customer service, what it's not saying is customer support and chat. And so we know that companies have been pushing for increased chat support, but there are scripts that people write even for human customer service, like call centers. Like, and that's why it's one of the most easily automated job functions is because the scripts already exist. It's easy to turn that into code.
Right.
So if you think about what's more likely to be automated when it comes to routine tasks, it's anything where there's logic, an algorithm, a script, something that can be written down with easy to follow rules. Unfortunately, those are the first things that we're seeing in this shift. And so what I am seeing when consulting companies are talking about where they see AI emerging in their clients and what they're predicting, it's 100% specifically around chat service is the number one. And then also machine learning. And so any machine learning is also at risk. And then when it talks about efficiency, I think that's so scary because a lot of us went through the big efficiency years of the early 2000s
Mm.
and the 80s. So like every 20 years, there's this big push for efficiency.
Yeah.
And then people bring in strategic consultants to help them identify what are the areas where they can increase operational efficiency and cut costs, right? Well, now that's even scarier because you can ask AI. So yeah, it can be scary, but I think that as we talk about like, is AI coming for your job and is your job one of these ones at risk? I think that that's what's important is having information because
Yep.
information makes it less scary, like you were kind of saying, right?
Exactly.
And then also then knowing what you're going to do about it. So I think it is important if you have certain careers that you do think are easily automated, I think that take that fear and turn it into something useful, which is identifying is my job at risk in the next 1 to 5 years? And should I do something about that, like
Yeah.
cross training?
Turn it into curiosity.
Turn it into curiosity and then action.
And then action.
Yes.
Exactly.
The other sub bullet under number 1 was job redefinition. So it says jobs will be redefined to focus more on complex problem solving, creativity, and human interaction, which are areas where AI currently lacks proficiency. Its word.
Okay.
Emphasis is mine on currently. Mm-hmm. But if you think about jobs being redefined to focus more on complex problem solving, that sounds nice. You're like, oh, of course, that's going to be great. Like you were saying, I don't want to do those routine tasks and those going to be taken
Exactly.
off my plate, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, there's going to be a reduction in necessary workforce in order to do that. And we're saying these are the things that are the most easily automated. These jobs are at risk now and for the next few years. We're going to start seeing this reduction quickly. Some of the other jobs and things that they talk about later in the list from ChatGPT, those are going to take a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
But what I think is really important to keep in mind is that while people are concerned about this topic, I don't think everybody is equally educated about the rapid pace of advancement. Because what's going on is that subconsciously, we all have this timeline of how long we think it's taken AI to get here. And so every year, if you think, oh, it's been like a 15% incremental advancement in the technology and the capabilities, that's what's going to continue to happen. That's actually not true. The rate of increased capability is actually exponential.
Yes.
So every year it's getting so much better. So if we're saying, hey, it's taken 5 to 10 years where AI is turning into something where it can threaten these jobs we just listed, that's how long it's going to take before the next level of job is at risk. That's actually not true.
Yeah.
And so these ones are at risk now. I can tell you we're already doing the work that will change and remove some of these jobs now. And the next level and the next level, that rate of progression is going to be significantly faster than what we've seen.
Yeah.
So something to keep in mind is do that replanning now is kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do that replanning now. You heard it first.
So point number 2 that ChatGPT came up with was a little bit surprising to me because it talked about remote and hybrid work models. I'm like, okay.
Say
So,
more.
right, exactly. That's what I said to ChatGPT. Say more. So the first sub bullet is about flexibility. So because of COVID-19, the job world accelerated the adoption of remote work. And AI tools are enhancing this trend by improving remote collaboration, communication, and productivity tracking. This sounds a little salesy to me. It sounds like ChatGPT is trying to get us to feel better about this because I don't see that necessarily.
How so?
I mean, I feel like companies in the last 2 years have been trying so hard to push people to go back to the office.
Mm-hmm.
And while AI might make hybrid roles theoretically easier, companies, we already know that they don't want that. I think they're actually going to start, it's going to have a different effect of if I can't see you, do I need you? Especially since it's coupled with this thought of how can I find efficiencies
Mm-hmm.
and how can I, as an executive, use AI to save costs? Well, it's people costs they're trying to save. I know that one. I don't know if I'm buying that one. This thought from ChatGPT is not Gabby approved.
I don't
see it.
Thumbs down.
Thumbs down. Before we go on to point number 3, though, I do want to say that I love your point that there's certain things that AI can't replace, and it's that human touch, and it is some of the more complex problem solving and creativity. And I think that's a really good example of where that tells you what to lean into as you look at cross training and you look at, if you're in an at risk job area, what you could be looking for.
I agree.
Which is a great segue into number 3, which is skills shift. So ChatGPT says there will be a demand for new skills. There will be a growing demand for skills in AI development, data analysis, and other tech-related fields. Disagree on data analysis, as I mentioned before. Soft skills such as critical thinking, emotional intelligence, and adaptability will also become increasingly valuable. So I love the adaptability one.
Say more. Why do you love the adaptability one?
Because adaptability in AI has to be coded. And eventually it will start learning that on its own as its models get better. But right now it's better at analysis and predictive language, which is why the focus is on repeatable tasks and machine learning type things. So adaptability and that kind of human ingenuity, that's going to be one of the hardest things to replace, in my opinion.
And I giggled a little bit because a guy I mentor has an MBA at Harvard, and he studied data analysis and machine learning. And he always tells me, and I'm going to see if I can get it right because these aren't words I normally say, but he said AI is not good at non-stationary data sets.
Mm,
And non-stationary meaning things move and change,
data
like the
shifts,
start
yeah.
the stock market, human emotions, things like that. AI is very, very good at stationary data sets, like the weather in May in this area of the country is generally like this, so we can predict, based on that. But non-stationary data sets, like, it just isn't there, and it's going to be, based on what he said, it's going to be a long time before it can really, really get there effectively.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that when it comes to data sets that are a little more static, like retail data sets, like
Mm-hmm.
people's spending patterns
Right,
and doing.
patterns based on the past.
That's right. And it's going to be really good at analyzing that, but
Right.
it's going to take a bit before it can truly get much better predictive modeling. And even as people use, really intelligent data tools today, it requires the human to program those data tools to tell it what to look for in order to do predictive work to some extent. So it is going to take a bit before AI gets there, but data analysis is 100% going to be AA's sweet spot much sooner than people think, much sooner than apparently ChatGPT thinks. All right. The second part of skill shift is continuous learning. Lifelong learning and continuous skill development will be essential as job requirements evolve with technological advancements. So this is actually ChatGPT telling us what to do.
I was going to say, this is an opportunity to use AI to get better at being a human.
Yeah, okay. Better being a human. I like
I
that.
think because you can use, like, for me, sometimes I get blocked. You ask me to write a bio, right, for our website, and I'm like, I freeze. But I'm like, oh, I've got ChatGPT. I can just type in, here's what I want to say, make it sound better, and it makes me sound like a better human. So, like,
That's so funny.
it can really help make a human be more extensible.
I like extensible, right? Like I really like that and the continuous learning aspect. And I think that the continuous learning is actually what people need to be focusing on today. Because again, this is what I bring to She Makes It Work, which is that pragmatic perspective. What can you do? What can you, the listener, the viewer, do about what we're telling you? And I think it's really adopting that continuous learner mindset
Mm-hmm.
right now, like literally today. If you're not already thinking about this, you need to be. And that means you need to be learning to use AI. Like you absolutely need to be learning how to use AI to augment the things that you're already doing or want to be doing. And so I might challenge you. This is going to be some homework because you know me, I love some homework. I'm going to challenge you to sit down with ChatGPT, tell it what your current job is, and ask it how long it thinks the lifespan of that job will exist in corporate America and maybe what you should be cross training in.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to do exactly what it says. I love that it always caveats that ChatGPT can make mistakes, but as a starting point, because that's a really good way in order to test its ability to do trend analysis because it can, and then also see what resonates with you in terms of jobs that might take longer or things that you might shift to. I also think that this shift that we're seeing in people being more and more focused on content creation is actually the wave of the future because what AI cannot do is replace the entrepreneurial spirit and it can't replace raw creativity. And so if you search on YouTube, you'll see a number of people who are switching into content creation as their source of income and they're talking about how they use AI to do some of their tasks to extend their own
Right.
skills, right? For things that they don't know how to do, whether it's to train them on something or to offload the work to AI itself. When you look at that and you think about what is the shift that's going to come in our world because of this emergence of AI and what does that mean for the quote unquote work humans should be doing, that is a very early shift is to move into either trade skills. I've seen people talking about moving into trade skills more, like physical things that
Mm-hmm.
AI can't do
Mm-hmm.
yet, or to shift into this entrepreneurial mode where what you're doing is creating entertainment or bringing that human value to people where we still love that human connection. Like you could be listening to AI tell you this, but honestly you prefer Abby and I telling you this because we're human people.
Yeah.
We know
And
you prefer us.
yes. And well, and humans, we're built for stories, right? We're built for stories, to share those stories with each other. It's how we learn. That's what we're doing now. I think that's, something that AI just won't be able to replace because of that. It needs a prompt to go somewhere.
Right.
It
It's
need
not starting anything
it's
on its
not
own. It's not
starting from
initiating.
scratch. Exactly. You open up ChatGPT and it's like, what do you want to
What do
talk
you want?
about? What do you want? Exactly. So that's still that human seed of ingenuity. And then AI can help you build on that. And I think that's great. Again, making humans more extensible.
Well, Abby, yet again, you have jumped ahead to point number 4. That girl is always ahead. Number
Well,
4 is AI augmentation.
aha. See?
So AI augmenting humans. So the first sub bullet is collaboration with AI. So instead of replacing humans,
That's my entire stance.
right? Instead of replacing humans, AI will augment human capabilities. Employees will work alongside AI systems to enhance their productivity and decision-making processes. Okay. I have a story about this one. Because I've been really testing this out. Like, I've worked with ChatGPT over the last few versions, and I've been
Mhm.
playing a lot with AI image creation as well
Mhm.
as the actual chat feature itself. And so I was making an infographic for our first full episode, which is the 7 mistakes you're making at work that's holding you back. Small plug, go watch it if you haven't seen it already. So I was making an infographic for that, and I decided to add a worksheet. I wanted to make a job aid or a worksheet so people could, have a productive way to work through what we were challenging them to do. And I asked AI and I went to ChatGPT and I said, I came up with these 7 mistakes you're making at work and I want to build a worksheet. What questions would you suggest I put on the worksheet and kind of what prompts to give people, journaling prompts, etc. And it was really interesting because ChatGPT interpreted that as me asking for the 7 mistakes people could be making at work.
Oh, see?
Oh, girl, which is not what I asked,
Mm.
So of course me and my little judginess. I was like, that's not what I asked. But it was interesting because it came up with its own list of 7 things, obviously. And maybe 3 or 4 of them were either similar to what I came up with, similar enough, and maybe one was identical, and the rest were different. And I think my point on that is that the thought capital we bring based on our experiences is more valuable than we think it is, and that's
Mm.
not something that's easily replaced, and I'm gonna say yet, until AI gets a bigger data set. Now, theoretically, AI is constantly learning based on the inputs we put in, and so
Mhm.
if I had put in the 7 mistakes, AI would then be learning from my experience and thought capital. That's
Mm.
something that's going to continue to happen. So its
Mhm.
information base is going to be continuously expanding, so it's going to get better at coming up with its own thing. But I can say its list was pretty good. Like, if I didn't have, the literal decades of experience in this space and I had just asked it for the 7 mistakes, those would be very helpful things to look at. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They were good. They were maybe better than I hoped they'd be
Mm.
when it unprompted gave me this information. And then the questions it had in order to work through it were pretty good. So I'd say that to be a savvy consumer, I'm always going to turn this into multiple dimensions. To be a savvy consumer of content, as I mentioned before, a lot of your content creators are using AI to create the materials that they're providing to you as a consumer. And so what you want to do is take a critical lens towards that because I fully support the use of AI to make these things easier. 100%. I don't think
Yeah.
there's anything wrong with that. But as a consumer, I think it's really important to kind of do a vibe check on how much of this seems like something that someone is genuinely and authentically contributing, right? Like when we create our content, like Abby and I, again, we're authentically and fully present in that content. These are
Right.
our own thoughts, and you can tell that. And if we ever use AI, we will tell you. I used AI to make that worksheet, kind of. But do you see what I'm saying? And so when you look at the content that you're purchasing online, courses, anything like that, I think it's going to be more important to really understand, is this something I could go to AI for myself? Or is it worth paying that someone like these content creators went and put the thought into it and curated it and put their own branding on it and they're packaging it up for me? So I would just say as a consumer, just really be conscious of that. Not because I think there's anything wrong with it, but as people start getting money from you, just be aware of what they're getting for free and that maybe you could do.
It's an excellent point.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's interesting. I hadn't
Something
thought
on
of
my
it.
mind a lot.
Yeah.
So, in addition to collaboration with AI, it also says enhanced roles. So, roles such as AI trainers, explainers, and sustainers will emerge, focusing on training AI systems, interpreting AI outputs, and ensuring ethical AI use.
Mm.
This is a different spin on something I was thinking because what I'm thinking is that in terms of jobs, which is really what we're focused on, is like the heart of our topic today, is that as there's a shift towards AI, there's going to be a market for implementing AI, for finding uses for
Absolutely.
AI and then implementing those uses. That there will be a bubble of jobs like that
Mm-hmm.
people can feel free to maximize on that bubble.
Yeah.
Consultants certainly will for a long time. All right. And then once AI is a little bit more embedded, there's also going to be this role that it's talking about for AI trainers and
Mm,
ethics. I was just thinking more of your need to be AI savvy because you are going to be required to use AI more in your role. But if you're working for a company, the more you're the person who knows how to use AI, or you're the person who's better at using AI to get outputs, the more attractive you are at your job.
for sure. Well, and as any emerging skill, right, is in demand, there's going to be a bubble. There's going to be job shifts, and there's going to be people who, are ahead of the curve, and you want to be that person.
And I just think it's really interesting that it's saying that there will be net new steady state jobs, like being the AI ethics person and
Mm,
ongoing AI training. And so I think that is good. I don't think that there's going to be a huge quantity of those roles, but if you think about how every company has to have, for example, compliance officers, I think that
mhm.
having ethics around the use of AI at work is something that I don't think companies will jump on right away. I think something's going to have to go wrong before most companies will make that investment,
Likely.
right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with having like a chief diversity officer. A lot of companies
Mm,
say they want to, and then they don't unless they have an incident,
yeah.
right?
Right.
I think it's going to be the same thing with the ethics. So I do think that there's going to be potentially these new jobs around the use and management of AI.
Absolutely.
It's going to be slower. It's going to be a little bit slower.
That tracks with corporate
Mm-hmm.
America though, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like they're gonna need to know they need to do it and spend the money before they get excited about it. And usually what happens is they'll adopt a new technology or a new way of working, and then it has to completely blow the F up before they realize they have to put guardrails around it.
Yep.
Just like, oh my gosh, this reminds me of the early days of technology
Exactly.
when people were just implementing code in production directly, and then it
Right.
took a while to get like
Best
best
practices, center of
practices,
excellence, all those things come after all of the learnings of the
what could
rush.
go wrong.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting.
Got to bump into stuff to figure out how to not bump into stuff.
All right. So this is, I'm going to say, a little bit repetitive to what we've been talking about because this next one has been a theme in what we've been talking about already, but it is displacement, specifically job displacement and creation. So, displacement, certain jobs, particularly those involving repetitive and manual tasks, may be at risk of displacement due to AI automation. We've talked about that
We've
already.
talked about
These
that.
jobs are going to go away.
Right.
So, it's just reality.
Exactly. But that's where again, the mindset workaround is looking to see how this can be an opportunity, but also realizing this isn't the first time this has happened, right? When Henry Ford rolled out the car, we're like, what are we going to do with horses? Like, it happens all the
Those
time.
horses lost their jobs, Abby.
Well, people whose jobs were like carriages, right? Like, I mean, it happens it's happened throughout history. This is another version of that, in my opinion.
I agree. Change is inevitable. I think the horse thing is funny. Yes, it's constantly sad for those horses. Okay. So, new opportunities, again, something we've been talking about, which is conversely, AI will create new job categories and opportunities in tech development, AI ethics, and maintenance. Maintenance for sure. That shit's going to break.
Yeah. And that's how we're going to get some more of center of excellence, best practices. Like that's how
Hmm.
these things come to exist is because we are doing the best we can. We're running as fast as we can. And then we're going to trip over some things and we're going to learn how to not trip over things.
Yeah, people are going to overinvest. Something's going
Mm-hmm.
to go wrong. They'll scale it back. They'll put more guardrails around it. That'll be a 6 years cycle. I think for the next 6 years, that's what we're going to see happening.
Mm,
That's my prediction.
cool.
All right. Changes in org structure.
Say more about this.
Get ready. This is not what we expected. So, before I say this one, I'm just going to say that there's a traditional thought process around this because in the consulting world and in the outsourcing world, we've seen a lot of job shifts happen before. And just going to use outsourcing and offshoring as an example. So, we had a big offshoring push in like 2005 to
Mm-hmm.
2012ish was kind of the big heyday of offshoring. And in that time, we did a lot of analysis on what jobs were most likely to be offshored and which ones would stay onshore and not get reduced. And that was a really scary time in technology, for example. And so technology and call centers were obviously the most impacted. And the traditional wisdom is that management functions and architects, so kind of that creative technical problem solving, would
Mm-hmm.
stay on shore, and management, project management, but also organizational management would stay on shore and not necessarily be at risk. And we saw some reduction in the middle management layer in the biggest push for offshoring. And then after that kind of faded a little bit, we saw the jobs come back to middle management. And so people are always trying to reduce middle management because it's a fairly expensive layer. It's bigger than people think. Like there's more middle managers than people think. And those are fairly expensive roles. And so once you get rid of a lot of the doers, you think you can get rid of a lot of the managers. Sorry to say get rid of, but that's the thought, right? However, that's not what AI is saying about AI. So AI is saying, according to ChatGPT, flattened hierarchies. AI can streamline decision-making processes, leading to flatter organizational structures with less middle management. Whoa. First of all, that contradicts what ChatGPT was saying earlier about which jobs were most likely to be
Yeah,
offshored. It
exactly.
wasn't decision
Contradiction.
making.
So,
And what's really interesting is that middle management decision making is often focused on people management, the things that are harder to code for AI. But this is a huge caveat. I read in the news a week or two ago, there's a very big company you know of that just decided to lay off all of its middle management and went to the teams and told them to self-organize. Like this is already happening.
whoa.
So I'm not going to name the company, but feel free to look up this article because it's out there and it's a company that you've heard of. And again, decided to lay off its middle managers and told the teams to be self-organizing. That is not a thing that works. If there's one thing that we've learned from like agile development, for example, self-organizing doesn't mean self-managed,
Right.
right? And again, in the 7 mistakes, I know I told people to focus on self-management, like manage yourself, but teams don't manage themselves. They can self-organize in some ways, but there has to be somebody who's helping to give that structure.
Yeah.
So this one's a little worrisome because, again, this goes against the conventional wisdom that management jobs are somewhat safe when we see big shifts like this.
So the company that laid off all the middle managers, what do you see happening there?
Oh, it's going to be chaotic. It's going to be madness.
Chaos.
It's going to be
That's what
total
it is.
chaos because unfortunately people need org structure. They do need a little bit of hierarchy in order to function at scale. Now, this isn't true when you're talking about 2 or 3 people. Like Abby and I have our own company. We don't need a boss. We're 2 people. But you bet your tushies that if we had 20 people in our company, we would be the bosses. There'd be no mistake made about that. Like if we hired 20 people, we'd be like, have fun,
Go
figure it
do
out,
things.
self-organize.
Around what?
Right, around what? Use AI to tell you what your job should be.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, I think companies are going to try this one. This is a very attractive option for companies. I do think companies will 100% try eliminating middle management. We're going to see the loss of certain roles. It's going to be chaos. And then people will tail between their legs, start to walk it back. But by the time they walk it back, the world will have changed somewhat because there will be less employees as well.
See, and I was thinking along the lines, it sounds similar of like with COVID and how everyone we went to remote work 100%. Everybody's remote. We're doing remote. We're
And we're going
getting
to do
up
it forever.
We're going to do it forever.
Yep.
We're going to give up our leases. And then a few years later, it's like, whoa, 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 wait, hold on. You think it's pretty much going to be like that? Yeah.
It will be. And again, the world will look different once the middle managers come back. Teams will be smaller. There will be fewer total middle management jobs. So again, it's the pendulum swing. We're here because we got bloat. I mean, honestly, we did get bloated middle management again. That's been the trend. And then it's going to swing the other way and then it's going to settle
Overcorrect.
in the middle. It won't look like it did.
Mm.
So, and it's going to be funny watching these companies walk it back because whenever I see things like this happen and I watch the statements that come out from the executives and then whenever they reverse it, like very few times do they actually be like, wow, we effed that up.
They don't hold themselves accountable. Is that what
They
you're saying?
either don't mention, like they'll make this big announcement that they're making this change, but when they reverse the change, it's always like quietly, like it's always like hush hush. Whereas I actually more respect the 1 or 2 companies out of the hundreds that make these kinds of changes, the 1 or 2 that'll come back in and be like, wow, that blew. We are not doing that.
Yeah. Well, and how do you think we get our center of excellence, our best practices? Like it's bumping into things like this.
Yeah, but they mask it differently,
It,
right? Like even then they say, "Oh, we have to implement this other thing because of the change they made, not
mm,
we're rolling it back or we
yeah.
were wrong." They're like, "Oh, now we know we need to add this." They're going to be like, "Oh, now we need to add these things." They might not even call them managers. They'll make up some other title. But they're going to pretend like that's not what they're doing. And that part is really funny for me to like watch unfold. Like that's actually
Yeah.
one of the reasons I love watching these trends
Just
is
eat some popcorn to that.
yeah, exactly, just to see how it goes.
Yeah.
So that's a funny one. Oh, so funny. So related to the related to the changes in org structure is decentralized teams. So with AI tools facilitating communication and a collaboration, organizations may adopt more decentralized team structures.
Explain what you mean by decentralized team structures.
Decentralized team structures, I think, is going to be looser ideas of teams. So decentralized in that there won't be a centralized manager, but I think team functions will be less rigid and you'll kind of have these job areas you work in. So we've already seen a lot of matrix organizations, for example, where people have like these really complicated like accountability structures versus reporting structures
Ah, okay.
like that. But I also think that's what's going to happen is that people are going to have like job pods, and we've already seen this as a trend coming out. I'd say it's coming up nowish in certain organizations, I won't say which ones, where they're starting to realize that those rigid silos are hindering
Right.
collaboration
Absolutely.
and thought and
Yes.
innovation, right? But I'm going to get a little deep on this one. But
Okay.
with the big kind of accounting, financial reckoning in the early 2000s of
Mm-hmm.
Sarbanes-Oxley, job separation and rigid job functions from an accountability perspective are an actual regulated requirement in certain areas. And so that's why there's separation of duties for certain technical functions like development versus deployment and checks and balances on the people who are analyzing versus doing. And just there's a lot of things that came out of that world that actually increase the siloing and the rigidity of these like really strongly defined roles. So in this new world, there's still going to be some like regulatory requirements around separation of duties, but I think that those lines are going to start getting blurred. That was a long time ago that that came up. People aren't getting their wrists slapped as much. I've already
Mm.
seen people forgetting why we do that, to be honest. Like I see a lot of people in positions of responsibility who weren't around or working in the industry at the time. And so they don't know that that's why we have certain practices in place.
Mm.
So when you lose the why, it's so much easier to go astray.
Yeah.
So I think people are going to start, people, meaning companies, are going to start making mistakes in this push towards decentralization because they're going to lose like which things need to be centralized and separate and siloed and which things shouldn't be separated and siloed. So again, I think there will be some missteps, but in general, I like the trend of reducing the silos because as someone who again works with a lot of companies and works with a lot of teams, I've seen that we've gone too far in the area that
Mm-hmm.
people don't understand the big picture as
Right.
much. They don't understand like why they're developing or designing something, and they're just
Mm-hmm.
losing a lot of context because they're just so focused on the one thing they do. We've got to get away from being cogs, is I think the message here.
I totally agree. I coach that all the time is understand why you're doing what you're doing. Where's when you're doing something, where's it coming from? Where's it going to when you're done with it? If you don't understand that, then you're just
How does it impact other things?
exactly.
Yeah, and I see that unfortunately with a lot of roles where the intention of the role is to see the bigger picture, but people are coming from a silo because everything's so siloed. So it's harder for them to get that, let's just call it an enterprise or cross functional lens
Mm-hmm.
versus coming from an area where they had the opportunity to jump around a little bit more and be a little bit more of a Swiss Army knife or have more breadth of experience and then narrow it down. Does that make sense? They're coming from narrow and trying to get broad. That's
Mm.
tough for people.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So there was something I didn't like about this. Oh, right. With AI tools facilitating communication and collaboration. What? Why? I should have asked. This is a good example of me not asking a clarifying question because what the heck? This is the second time it's saying in AI is increasing communication and collaboration. And I'm going to go back and ask ChatGPT, why do you think that? Like, what do you think is happening? Like, I feel like
Show
we've,
your work.
show your work. Like, I feel like we already have great collaboration and communication tools.
Yeah, how could they be better?
I don't know. And the example I use is like we can get on Zoom calls, we can do things, but I really like what you said, Abby, at the beginning of our conversation, which is that there's some things that can't replace the human experience or the touch on the shoulder. And I'm going to use an example from our own business that we've started, which is that Abby and I can do some work remotely, and sometimes we'll call each
Mhm.
other and text and we do all of that, but we get together physically in person regularly. Not just on filming days,
Yeah.
but when we're brainstorming, when we want to have really deep conversations, when we're really doing some like hard, deep work on ourselves and on the business and what it means to be business partners, when we're doing that really deep work, we prefer to do it in person. And I'm just like, okay, so we already have the tools for when we want to be remote. And then when we're in person, it's because there's a reason. So, what is AI going to do that would help with either of those scenarios?
Yeah, exactly. Because being in person, think about it, it's not just the words we're saying, it's the intonation, it's the looks on our faces, it's the energy, the vibe we bring. You know, when I'm down, you can feel it. When I'm up, you can feel it. How is AI going to replace or read or enhance those things?
I think it would be cute. One thing that would be nice is like if it was like productivity and collaboration, if AI did automated whiteboarding for us. And so one thing I love, I'm just kind of like brainstorming right now, is one thing I love is that like visual requirements gathering where I'm
Mm.
saying I want something and somebody like draws a picture instead of like writing down my words. That would be super fun. And I just watched a video this morning where they use generative AI to generate a video of Ryan Gosling. So fake Ryan Gosling generated by AI describing how these language models work in AI. And at one point, Ryan Gosling paused and said, "I would like a whiteboard, please." And so he's using voice commands with this generative AI model, and it pops up the image of a whiteboard. So AI generated Ryan Gosling asked for a whiteboard, a blackboard, but he asked for one and then AI popped it up. And so as he's talking, he's holding this whiteboard and everything he's saying is being reflected on this virtual whiteboard. That would be a fun collaboration tool.
Hmm.
And I think that the collaboration that people like to do in person, if they can't be in person, that would be an enhancement to being remote. So I can see it enhancing it, but that deeper connection, and I'm just going to say that human element is what can't be replaced or even augmented. And I'm going to give an example. So, I have unfortunately been in the position where multiple times in my career I've had to have hard conversations with teams or with employees or team members. And it was really interesting because when I have those hard conversations with an individual, let's say they're resistant to feedback or, it's kind of a corrective conversation. Unfortunately, the nicer ones didn't work, so it has to be a little firmer. Those tend to, no matter what I do, I just can't seem to convey the empathy part of the professional empathy. And so those conversations are really hard where you're a leader, you've had the other conversations, they're not working. And so you have to be, a little bit like, hey, this is really at the time where we need to see a change in this behavior. And whenever I have those virtually, camera on, facial expressions, I can't seem to convey that empathetic part. And the reason I'm highlighting that is because recently I had an opportunity to have kind of a digging deep, hard conversation with someone in person. And when I was having that conversation, I thought, I don't want to have this conversation over the phone and we're local. So I'm going to set up a time where I can see that person in person. And drove to their house and we sat across from each other, like on the couch, and we had the conversation. And it was great because they were able to get to this aha moment about why they were having the struggle they were having. And I was like, hey, I know I insisted on being in person. I really thought this conversation would be better in person than over like Zoom or something. And they're like, you're right. I felt the empathy more because
Mhm.
you were here.
Yeah. It's irreplaceable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, it's the vibe. Like, when someone, the kids say these days the vibes are off. Well, that's a real thing. The vibes are on.
The vibes are on.
You can literally feel. I mean, I don't know how deep I want to go here, but there's, we have an energy field. Like, it's literally proven. It's scientifically proven. I'm not just woo woo out here. I mean, I am, but also it's scientifically proven. So we can literally feel each other's energy without saying words. So that's a real thing that gets lost behind the screen.
I think so too. And I agree with you. When I talk about self-management in that other
Mhm.
video, I specifically talk about the energy you bring into a room.
Mhm.
And you can sense that like virtually, but it is like 10 times stronger in person, both good and bad. So I think the point of this that I want to make is that as AI talks about how it can enhance communication and collaboration, I've got like question mark over my head about that, but I can brainstorm some ways where it can improve collaboration with like these like visualization tools where it can take what we're saying and visualize it for us while we're collaborating virtually. But I also want you, the listener and viewer, to be aware that there's something that's irreplaceable. So when you think about how to appropriately use AI, but also like where do we as humans still exist and fit into this world, honing in on what is that human element and how to lean into that, I think is going to be really, really critical to surviving this change of AI hitting the job space. Does that make sense? And just really focusing on what is that unique differentiator about being
Mhm.
human and how can you turn that into.
No, exactly to your point is if you know where AI's strengths are and you know where its weaknesses are, you lean into the weaknesses of AI with human strengths and you become again more extensible, more valuable so you know where AI has a place and when AI may be overstepping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe overstepping and also where not to give up too much of your own power,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah,
That's a big one for us.
exactly.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that was a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So
Some
we've
more?
got one more.
All right. Here we go.
Decentralized teams would turn into a
I
conversation
know
about energy fields.
existential like
All right. So number 7, ethical and societal considerations.
big one.
Big
Big
one. I
one.
have big thoughts about this one too.
Let's go.
Big, 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 big thoughts.
Big Gabby thoughts. Let's go.
Big, big, yummy thoughts. I love that. Ethical AI use. Ensuring ethical use of AI, addressing biases in AI systems, and protecting privacy will be critical challenges.
I was going to mention this in a few, but I had a feeling we were going to get to it. So I was
Good
like,
for
don't
you.
jump ahead.
Yes, girl.
But that AI, the ethics of AI and like what the biases of AI. And so I think that's where the role of the ethics moderator in AI is so important because we need to understand who's programming this, what are their biases, and how biases are learned in machine learning.
Say more about the biases.
Well, I mean, think about who's in tech right now, who's building AI, generally white men, right? And the biases that white men have or the experiences they don't have of being a woman, a person of color, a minority of any kind. We're already seeing that in AI. We're already seeing the biases come out of even medical diagnoses, right? If you're using ChatGPT or something for if you're using ChatGPT for medical diagnosis, the medical diagnoses are based on white men, not even for women. Like there's a lot of bias built in to AI and not necessarily on purpose and not maliciously necessarily, but I think that this is going to be something that we need to really, really focus on.
Definitely not maliciously, but the reason I'm smiling is because nobody has mentioned this recently, and I don't know why. So it was maybe 5 years ago. My brain wants to say three, but I'm so old now that 3 years is usually 5 to 7. So 5 to 7 years ago, um, two bots appeared on Twitter. This is before the whole Twitter turned into X, like all that drama. Nothing to do with that drama before that drama. So people created bots that were AI, and their intention was to learn about the human experience through being online, through being part of the online culture.
Ooh.
So you talk about biases. There's a few different sub pockets of online culture. There
Mm.
were subcultures within Twitter. For example, there's a huge writing community on Twitter. There's a huge gaming community on Twitter. And I think it was within 2 days that AI, that first one that got super famous at the time, completely devolved into profanities, racism, sexism, all the bad
You mean the
isms.
bad comments on social
Yeah,
media?
because it was learning the worst of us through social media.
Mm.
And so it's really about like, what are you training your AI on?
Exactly.
What biases are you having? Or even what are you exposing it to? Because it was a fun experiment to see what would AI learn on its own just by being exposed to humans. But again, the online culture is in and of itself a subculture. There's so
Mm,
many people who aren't online in certain spaces,
right.
and so their voices are not being heard, and it's getting quote unquote programmed, it's programming itself based on that. And it was two different bots they did this one. One went off the rails worse than the other, but they literally had to shut them down and deactivate it
Mm.
and scrub them
Ooh.
because what it learned was, again, the worst of us.
Mm.
And so that's where, when it comes to programming AI, you need it exposed to diversity of thought, but you also need to make sure that it's got some sort of rubric to reject things that we find societally
Socially.
unethical, socially, but unappealing. Like, it has to have a rubric for deciding what is worth consuming or not, just like we do.
Uh-huh.
Just like you hear about humans being radicalized by the internet, if they get into
Mm.
certain pockets of the internet, it's completely true for what AI is being exposed to, unless it's got, let's talk about guardrails again, unless it's got guardrails around knowing what not to consume and what to reject.
Yeah. I mean, it's similar to parenting, really. If you've got this like just green field, and you've got
Little
to
brain.
train it.
Mm-hmm.
We train children. I go back to children because single mom, but we train our children in certain ways. It's like, okay, this is behavior is okay in this certain situation, and this behavior is not okay in other situations. That contextual awareness is really, really important. And I think that's definitely something that needs to be brought in and thought of and monitored with AI.
Yeah, and I think that with some of the, AI that we're being exposed to that we can interact with, like ChatGPT, I hope the guardrails are really good because I'm sitting here asking it about nerdy stuff, but there are people who aren't like me or like you, where they're going to be talking to AI about things that we can't even imagine. And so we
Mm,
need to make sure we know how much AI is learning and rejecting from the people it's interacting with in those contexts as well.
how do we do that?
Uh-huh. And so it's really nice in some ways because I know that for a lot of the packaged AI models, things where it's like Chat GPT versus just raw open source, or it may be true for raw open source, I don't know, but I know it's true for Chat GPT or, Dolly or Midjourney for image creation, they reject certain prompts. And so
Mm,
that means that they've got the guardrails coded around what you can put into your image creation ask, but that means it's also being quote unquote buffered from that AI engine itself.
mm,
So it's rejecting if you're trying to do things that are like too violent or too explicit in some way. And there's ways around it. People have found ways around it already, obviously,
yeah.
but at least it's got some of those basic guardrails. But I know that's true of like the image creation. I don't know how much that's true of Chat GPT. But if you ask it, like let's say you ask Chat GPT to write a really graphically violent story, it's rejecting some of those prompts. So it definitely does have some guardrails around it.
That's good.
Yeah, interesting, right?
Yeah.
I do have a funny story though. I don't know if it fits into this episode or not, but I was working with one of those AI headshot generators.
Yeah.
So I went online and watched a YouTube video about the top three, picked one, uploaded a bunch of photos, and I was really careful. And it says specifically not to upload any explicit photos, which included tank tops, like not even like a sleeveless shirt, which I thought was really interesting. I'm like, okay, whatever.
Hmm.
So every image I uploaded, I had fairly consistent, like, facial expressions, and it says try and get your photos within the same time frame, like everything within the last 6 months or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm like, I had roughly the same length of hair in most of my pictures, just very consistent, just different angles and settings. So I upload it, and this one gave you 40 images. And of the 40 images, some of them, my hair was 2 inches long. Some of them, it was, yes, it was above the shoulders. None of the photos that I uploaded have my hair above the shoulders. Like, this is the shortest my hair has been in a very long time. And it had like these really funny haircuts. I also selected the most professional. So there were 3 levels of like professionalism. So, like
Yeah.
business casual, I chose the most like corporate conservative one. It had me in like denim shirts. There was 3 in denim shirts. I know I didn't show these to you yesterday.
No.
I can't wait. After this, I'm gonna have to show Abby all these.
Yeah.
But they were
Put them in the
hilarious.
outtakes.
Yeah. So, and like it had me a variety of weights. So it had some where I weighed about half as much as I do now, and some where I weigh about twice as much as I do now. Like the weight spread was real. It was very funny. But
Yeah.
what was really interesting is that there was, and I upload no image of me had anything that was even as low as the neck on this shirt that I'm wearing now. Everything was like kind of crew neck. Did I say that right? Crew neck length,
Yeah.
style, height.
Crew neck.
Girl, I don't know what happened with crew neck, but I just shorted out. And it's one photo where I'm wearing a jacket, one of the few jacketed photos, and I'm wearing a button-up blouse that was unbuttoned to my sternum, and it invented chests. I'm just gonna say
Like
that. It
cleavage.
invented more than cleavage, Abby.
Oh my goodness. Okay. What? What?
One was higher than the other. One was
They
more
weren't even right?
visible than the other. I know, it was so funny. And I'm saying this because you've all heard the horror stories of people using AI to create artificial images of like celebrities
Mhm.
or of like us normal humans that are explicit, and you're not supposed. I gave it no prompts. This is a headshot generator. You can't give it prompts. It asks, like, you check boxes on like what you're looking for. You can't like free type anything, and nothing I uploaded had anything that was below a crew neck. So it just on its own decided to
Bizarre.
like make a naughty picture.
Bizarre.
Yeah. So something leached in is all I'm saying.
Whoa.
So talk about ethics. One of the biggest and most prevalent ethics scenarios around image creation right now is the ability to create nudes, for example, of fully clothed people. That is a huge ethical consideration in AI image generation. And when is it art versus when is it something else? And when is it people trying to be malicious in some way? Does that make sense? And so
Yeah.
I think that there's some really easily apparent use cases that obviously hopefully have nothing to do with business, but I'd also like to think my coworkers aren't taking my headshots.
Yeah.
And
Oy.
you're with me, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm tracking.
For those of you on audio only, Abby's facial expression just then was epic.
Go to the YouTube to see it. Like, what?
That was so funny.
Horrified.
I'm going to put that on the website. Okay. All right. The next one is social impact. Policymakers and businesses will need to address the social impact of AI on employment, including potential income inequality and the need for societal safety nets. Okay. This is the one I've got big thoughts on.
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So what ChatGPT is hinting at is that due to the number of displaced jobs, society will need to be prepared to support fewer working humans.
I was just
with
about
social
to say,
safety nets. That's what it's implying.
What if AI is the reason we get like a basic guaranteed income?
That would be awesome. But and I think that's a yes, right? I think that's going to be probably, unfortunately, I think we're 12 to 15 years away.
Yeah.
From that. And I think there's going to be some pain in the meantime, because again, I'm the pragmatic one, right? So I think there's going to be some rough years. Just brace yourself. But here's the thing. Not only could AI be the reason we have a basic guaranteed income, AI could actually be the downfall of late stage capitalism. Yes. And so that is what I think. And if you don't have a degree in the humanities, and if you haven't studied like sociology and the evolution of cultures and societies, this is a really good time, I think, to educate yourself. And I think that we've been a little bit disadvantaged because in the last 15 years, there's been a big push in education to push people into STEM, which is great. But there's also been a decrease in people getting educated in the humanities. And I think that we're at a real turning point in the culture of not only the United States, but in what it means to be a human in the world worldwide. I think this is a really big, I hate to say inflection point, but that's where we are, this is a huge inflection point. And I think that everybody, when they think about what it means to live in a society and what it means to live in capitalism, should really take some time to be educated about, like I said, the evolution of societies and culture and the impact of capitalism. One of the things I love about the younger generation, by the way, is they are very vocal about what it feels to live like in late stage capitalism.
Yes.
It's really impacting Gen Z and the younger millennials more than anybody else.
Well, yeah.
And they're frustrated about it. But if you think about it, capitalism is built on labor.
Mm-hmm.
What is AI changing?
Labor.
And so if you just take that to its logical conclusion that we've had to have capitalism, and in order to have capitalism, we've had to have labor. And there's been, I'm just going to say, we all know there's been a little bit of exploitation about the labor force. Yeah. Okay. I can go all in if you want.
Yeah.
There's been exploitation of the working class, for example. But if you think about AI and what it's going to do to that middle class, to the white collar jobs, that's going to be hugely impactful. But everybody's basically saying, how do we survive in our current societal construct when that changes? And what I'm saying is, the societal construct needs to evolve. It's been
Absolutely.
needing to evolve. And I think that this shift with AI, where you no longer need that labor force. And so all of the stuff that we've been hearing in the last like 10 years from very vocal politicians that maybe you agree with, hopefully you know, have some critical thinking skills, has been about like people wanting to increase birth rate again,
I was just thinking
to
that.
increase the labor force.
Uh-huh.
And what we're saying is there is a decreased need for that labor force.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there's a job shift, and yes, there should be less focus on having to increase birth rate to strain the natural resources in unnatural ways. But also, capitalism as a construct needs to fundamentally change because we don't need labor to keep our society running anymore.
Yeah. That's some heavy, good stuff. And well, if you think about who's enacting these policies that are designed to increase birth rate, the ages of those people versus the ages of the people who are choosing not to have children at the scale that previous generations have, like that tells you what you need to know right there. It's that there's this detachment of where we think we need to be and where we really are.
And as somebody who, even as what am I, a mid-range Gen X, I happen to be chronically online, right? And there is a lot of discourse around late stage capitalism, but also a lot of frustration about the age gap in who's leading the country, but also who's leading industries and corporations compared to this kind of emerging youthful voice. And so I'm going to say that I agree with the younger generations, the younger than Gen X, that the people who have been running things aren't necessarily the right people to lead us into the future, because they're going to keep holding on to the constructs that they know
That they know.
and the mindsets that they
And the
know
mindsets.
and the frameworks that they know. And they're
Yeah.
going to be the ones who are most insistent on finding the efficiencies while clinging to the current way of operating.
Yeah.
Whereas it's really time to say, do we need to keep operating this way if all of the underlying things that was built on have now changed?
Well, if you and then take it back to business, if you have a company that is running and it's running the way the society's running right now, you would say, "Hey, we've got a leadership problem. We need to boost this. We need to oust the CTO and maybe the board, and we need to get some fresh leadership in here." I mean, if it was a company, it would be you would say that.
Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. And as a consumer, just like you're a consumer of the government, you're a consumer of company services. I'm going to use an easy example, which is, why do we have a tax industry? The government knows how much you need to pay in taxes. And so I love that there's
I
this
love the
meme going
meme.
around. You've seen it
I've seen
too,
it, and I
right?
love it.
Which is like, oh, I have to pay taxes. Great. Tell me how much I owe. And the government's like, no, I'm not going to tell you. Well, do you know, government, how much I owe? Well,
Yep.
yes. Well, then why can't you tell me? Because it's a
You-
fun game where you have to go figure it out yourself. And if you're wrong, you're going to go to jail. I
Yep.
love that meme.
I love the meme too.
But
'Cause
if you
it's
think
so
about
real.
it, that's an artificial industry. And so as a consumer and as somebody who hopefully is engaged in caring about the future of our society, ask yourself, how many artificial industries exist and do they need to? Because I think that is actually what's going to become apparent as well, is with the emergence of AI, how many of these like middle industries need to exist, right?
The middle management, you mean?
Right, middle management, and translate that into middle corporations, right?
corporations.
Like right now,
Exactly.
why couldn't you use AI to do your own taxes? Why do you have to pay for tax software?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, the government should just tell you how much you owe. This whole thing's ridiculous to begin with, but if they did, what would happen? A bunch of companies would go out of business.
Yep.
And a bunch of jobs would be lost. It is an artificial industry at this point. It is kept around just to maintain itself. Just to maintain itself. Think about that.
And the
How
wheels are
many
starting to fall
things
off.
are in place just to maintain themselves?
Just
And
because.
how can you opt out of those? Because that's what your power is your spending power, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So big food for thought, because we've talked about a lot of things in terms of like, where should humans be focusing their industry? What is the impact to society? But also think about it. Those companies exist because somebody's paying them. Who's paying them? You are. Do you still need them? Big thoughts.
Big thoughts.
Big thoughts.
Ooh.
So the title of the episode is AI Coming for Your Job. I think I'm going to flip this and say, how are you going after those companies?
Ooh. Oh, wow.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining us for this discussion. If you want us to talk further about any of these concepts, please message us, go to our website, or leave a comment on our YouTube channel. I hope this was as fun for you as it was for us. I hope it was at least a little bit educational. And please do your homework. Go talk to AI, because AI needs to be your best friend. And if you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you are listening to us on the podcast, it would be amazing if you could leave us a review. Reviews help so much for small shows to get noticed. Please tell your friends. Please share as much as possible. And again, give us any feedback or let us know anything that you want us to talk about, because we're here. Thank you.
Okay, bye.